Material Differences, Chapter 17, Part 2. Breakfast and Bad Ideas. Down here. Figs led him down the hall to a door near the end. Yeager followed along behind him and stepped into the room after Figs, only to step back out once he got a look inside. "Why is that room filled with creepy, ominous death art?" he asked, with immediate concern for the paintings lining the walls. It wasn't one or two either, but dozens of various paintings on all the walls. They were the same abstract blotches of paint, odd patterns, and designs he understood to be art but had no personal interest in. However, these were all filling him with a distinct sense of dread. "What? They're not creepy, ominous death art," Figs insisted as he waved Yeager in. "Yes, they are. They're all blacks and reds and deathy type. It's fucking creepy." "Why do you have all this in here?" Yeager demanded to know. "They're abstract." "Just because you're so close-minded doesn't mean they're ominous," Figs defensively insisted with a glare. "And they're just being stored here temporarily while I get a gallery set up for them. And if you don't like them, you can just hide them." Figs hit a switch on the wall and protective shutters slid shut across the paintings to conceal them. "This has happened before, hasn't it?" Yeager asked. "You bought them all, and everyone else you've shown them to has agreed with me, and so you have to get rid of them, because no one wants to sleep in your lovely room of death." "I think they're fantastic!" Figs doubled down. "Yeah, well, I outrank you. They're creepy, ominous death art," Yeager countered. "A what? You think you can outrank me in art appreciation?" he gasped out. "Yes, that's how rank works. It applies to everything I say it does." Yeager stuck his tongue out at Figs, who then flipped Yeager off. So Yeager flipped Figs off, who shot back with both hands, which Yeager countered with the double bird. Once they'd run out of things to flip each other off with, however, there was a tap at the window, and Figs jumped in surprise. "The ghosts are out for blood!" he squealed out in a surprisingly high pitch for such a large guy. Yeager arched a brow at the synth's reaction. Figs then coughed and tried to play it off as his voice returned to normal. Well, since you outrank me, you go deal with the spooky ghosts at the window." He motioned Yeager towards the dark window in the corner. "It's only Spike, you idiot," Yeager admonished as he walked over and opened the window to let the bot inside. He knew it had been following him, and he'd waited for a signal, but the bot apparently figured it was easier to just tap on the window. "Oh. Hey, Spike!" "What's up, my bot brother?" "Give me one!" Figs walked across the room to extend a hand to the small bot, who reached out with a leg to slap Figs' palm, then waited for Figs to slap the extended leg in return. "I'm glad Spike's still around. How's he operating after all these years? You kept my tricks in his memory banks, at least." "Well, sure. I haven't wiped his memory," Yeager explained. "In how long?" Figs asked, however, as Yeager just stared back at him, he realized what Yeager meant. "Since the war. Since before. That's against, the entirety of the Shanghai Accords and virtually all bot laws. Have you at least been wiping the combat models?" Yeager just kept staring back at him. "Jesus, Yeager. The fuck, man? Look, if they get caught in a lockup during a reset cycle, I'm not sure if I can get them back. And they're all on light duty, so I figure..." He trailed off and shrugged. "Anything weird happen?" Figs asked. Well, none of them have gone on a berserk kill all humans rampage, if that's what you're asking." Yeager shrugged once more. "We can talk about this later. I'm going to sleep now." All right. Figs waved him off. "There's extra pillows in the closet if you need them. Climate control is there. The shower runs on the hot side of things." Figs ran down a few points for him. "If you dump your clothes in the chute, I'll get them washed while we're out tomorrow." He pointed to a chute in the wall, but Yeager once more gave him a look. "Where's your spare clothes?" "I didn't bring any," Yeager revealed. "What? You're just going to wear dirty clothes tomorrow?" Figs asked with a horrified expression. "I only wore them a day," Yeager defensively muttered. "That makes them dirty." Figs waved his hands. "Silkies are rated for 2 weeks of combat," Yeager retorted. "That doesn't mean you should wear them for 2 weeks straight. You grody-ass bastard." As Figs said that, Yeager flipped him off, and they once more escalated their middle finger fight. "Okay, I'm going to bed now," Jaeger announced when he was done giving Figs the double bird salute. "All right, see you in the morning, you filthy fuck!" Figs shot off as he left the room before Jaeger could retaliate. Left to his own in the room, Jaeger gave Spike a pat to set the bot into sleep mode, and then adjusted the climate control before inspecting the bed. Figs had tucked the sheets in tight enough that he could likely bounce a quarter off them. Jaeger had to even struggle a little to pull them out as he unmade the bed to get it the way he liked. Stripping down to his silkies and setting the rest of his clothes on a dresser for some tiny semblance of them being not dirty enough to just leave on the floor, he flopped on his side, tucked a pillow between his knees, and grabbed another pillow to hug. He figured that some guests might need time to settle into a strange room, especially one filled with creep ominous art, even if hidden behind shutters for the moment. However, being able to fall asleep just about anywhere, at just about any time, was the second most valuable skill he'd learned in the military, directly behind how to deal with unrelenting boredom. For a moment, he thought he might be a little worked up, because he was still awake. Then he realized what the problem was and reached down, pulled back the sheets, so just one leg was out from under the covers. Now in his perfect setup, he took a deep breath, counted backwards from 10 sheep, and fell asleep. In the distance, he could see the titan of 1,000,000 bodies slowly striding closer. Each line of defense would chip away at it, and yet despite the tens of thousands of bodies that fell free of the fleshy monstrosity, still it advanced. Meaty hands swiping down to smash aside tanks, artillery, and bots, as if they were little more than play toys. "Jaeger! I need your help!" He looked to the side and saw a smaller titan, only a few 100,000 bodies large. But it was bolstered with hunks of metal. It bore Mark's face. "Join us! Only together can we fend it off!" He could see scores of people lining up to be taken into the feet of the Titan. However, as he turned his head further, he saw a line of men with red shirts gunning down Xenos he saw approaching with their hands out. Why not let them in? "They'll make the Titan bigger faster," Jaeger asked and then waved it off. "Wait, no. I already know the answer is that you're a bigot, and you're wrong. I don't like this dream." He fell backwards then as the world disappeared in a brilliant white. The world spun around him then, and he was standing on a cloud. Leona was waiting for him in a brilliant set of silver armor. Much better. "Mon amour," she said as she held out a hand. He could hear the music softly start to play as he took her hand and stepped in to dance with her. "Didn't want to tarry in the mud?" "The mud can wait," he murmured as he leaned in to gently brush his cheek against hers. He could feel the light electric tingle from her powerful heart against his flesh. She had that same wonderful angelic smell, like vanilla-scented gun oil. She kept the pace of the dance mercifully slow for him. It was all he could manage with his dumb feet. "Did you know Fig's family is rich?" he asked as they danced across the sky on the back of the cloud. "Of course. Cheshire Chemicals." She smirked a little as she told him that, as if it should have been obvious. "I thought we met his family. That giant barbecue with 100 people at least in Bushtown." He loved these conversations with her. Just little moments in the day where he could casually talk about life with her. Nothing dire or crucial. He's a man with 3 families. The family of blood-born, the family chosen, and the family of bloodshed, Leona mentioned with a soft smile. Jaeger wanted to kiss her, to squeeze her tight and never let go, but instead he settled for slowly kissing his way down the side of her face and neck while they danced. As he reached the crook of her neck, she slipped her hand up to slowly run her nails up the back of his head through his hair. Oh God, how he'd missed that feeling. So soothing, so comforting. Apparently he wasn't fond of the family born. Jaeger mentioned, and tilted his head up to press into the light scritching of her nails along his scalp. Not all. He did love his great-grandmother. Ginger, I believe, Leona mentioned, and then pulled back from him for a moment. He was worried the dance would end, but instead, she just used the extra space to spin in against him so he could turn and slowly dip her with a flourish. Then he slowly pulled her back up to her feet so the dance could go on. "I'm probably going to have to kill your brother, you know." Why did he have to spoil things? He cringed as soon as he said it. But Leona just laughed, her voice sparking dozens of golden rays of sun to shine down upon their cloud. You think I don't know that? He always was a pretentious little shit. Don't worry about it. You know I'm with you every step of the way. They both laughed then and continued to dance. A slow trumpet began to pick up then, and he recognized the song right away. There wasn't anything else in his world while the song played. Just Leona, the cloud, and the two of them dancing across the sky together. Hold me close and hold me fast. The magic spell you cast. This is La Vie en Rose. Jaeger tried to sing to the music playing around them. Leona laughed and gave him a tight squeeze for a moment. Jaeger, I love you. But sweetie, you can't sing. Leona teased him and gently rubbed her forehead against his. Just means I need to sing louder, right? He asked, and then belted out the next line. When you kiss me, heaven sighs. His voice nowhere close to the right key as she laughed and mercifully leaned in to kiss him, if only to shut him up. They kept moving slowly, with the music as it picked up and actually played now that Jaeger had stopped trying to sing. He wanted the song to go on. The mud could keep waiting. He didn't want anything to do with it. He'd just spend his time here in the clouds with Leona. It could last forever. The smell of hot dirt made his eyes flutter. Slowly sitting up in the bed, he looked around a moment and ran a hand through his hair as he woke up. The light was pouring in from the windows, bathing the whole room in golden rays of sunshine. The pillow he'd tucked between his legs was on the floor, and somehow the sheets had gotten completely twisted and wrapped up around his legs, like he'd been kicking them around for some reason. He felt sad, but also oddly happy. Sad, happy, sappy. He snorted a little at the thought. He figured there was a better word for his feelings then, but he had no idea what it was. Taking the time to free his trapped legs from the sheets, he stretched out and got up, scratching himself idly as he walked to the door, drawn by the scent of coffee. He opened it a crack to make it easier to shout. Did you burn the coffee like you always do? Fuck you! You just don't know how to appreciate dark roast, came Fig's reply from down the hall. That sounds like a yes to me, Jaeger called back. Fuck you! Jaeger smirked as Figs yelled back. Then he shut the door and walked into the bathroom. He was worried that he might have to decipher some sort of secret artistic abstract shower control system, but thankfully it was a standard shower. A small blessing for guests, no doubt, considering the rest of Fig's taste in furnishings. Reaching in, he turned on the water and then stepped back to give it time to heat up. Then he remembered Fig's warning and reached in to turn it down a little. It was already hot, so he stepped in and then immediately stepped back out as he muttered and pulled off his silkies. Now, actually ready, he stepped into the shower and just leaned against the far wall with his forehead pressed against the tile wall. Part of his body demanded he get out of the shower right now and go back to sleep, but he resisted the urge. He did notice that he was sore, in strange places, and groaned softly as he began to move around trying to figure out why he was sore. Right, he'd been shot out of Circuit Mountain with Tanya in the escape pod. Pulling a few G's in an escape pod was enough to make him sore these days. Getting old sucked. As the hot water poured over him, he slowly transitioned from walking corpse to functional-ish adult and finally pulled back from the wall. Looking around the shower for soap and shampoo, he frowned as he saw a few bottles and what he thought was a bar of soap in the shape of a pyramid, with plant bits stuck in it. Skipping the soap pyramid, he picked up the bottles. Cleansing citrus peripherals? Orbital orchid ideals? Passion pineapple storm? What the fuck were with the names? What the hell did they mean? Resorting to the tried and tested methods he'd learned, Jaeger just opened all 3 bottles and squirted a bunch into one hand before rubbing it into his hair and face and everywhere else for that matter. One of the 3 had to do something close to what he wanted, right? Once he was satisfied that one of the expensive, fruity soaps had at least masked the scent of dirt with something slightly more pleasant, he washed off and then got out of the shower. After a quick dry-off, he pulled his silkies back on and walked out to the kitchen to get some coffee to complete his transition to fully functional adult. As he stepped out into the kitchen, Figs looked up from the stove. He'd changed out of his jeans and lightstick shirt from the night before into what had to be a pointlessly expensive designer bathrobe. Yet he was also wearing the same cheap bunny slippers from the dollar store that Jaeger had bought him 20-some-odd years ago. Jaeger! You're not wearing any pants! Really? Just notice, Jaeger replied with a snort. My niece is here! Figs hissed out, and Jaeger suddenly tensed up and frantically looked for something to cover up with. For a moment, he spared a glance behind him at the main room to look for a child he'd somehow missed. It was empty. He glared back at Figs, who was grinning and giving him the double finger guns. Gotcha. Asshole! Jaeger growled out and then looked for a pot of coffee. However, instead of an ordinary Senor Coffee, Figs had some sort of stacked rock sculpture that was trickling the liquid down some rocks into a mug. Why the fuck can't you do anything the normal way? Jaeger asked as the rock sculpture finally stopped pissing coffee into a mug for him. Because I've got way too much style for that, Figs replied as he went back to tending whatever he was cooking on the stove. Jaeger took a hesitant sniff at his cup of coffee and grimaced a little. You know, I typically like my coffee. Like your men. Strong and black. Figs cut in with a wiggle of his eyebrows. Sure, why not? But when you make the coffee, I feel a strong urge to pump it full of butter and sugar. Jaeger reached for the sugar nearby, and then caught the way Figs was looking at him. What? He tried to mentally backtrack and figure out what Figs was looking at him like that. Shit, what did I say? Butter and sugar. Figs chuckled and pointed at the fridge. I've got some sticks in there if you want to butter up your beverage. No. Jaeger sighed and shook his head. I'll stick to butter and cream. Fuck. He clenched his eyes shut a moment. Cream and sugar. Jaeger growled out a little as he finally managed to get the right words out. Yeah, you should drink up so you can remember how to speak words more gooder. Figs mocked and stirred something up with a spatula. What are we having? Jaeger asked, as he fixed up the coffee with cream and sugar to cover up the burnt taste that he insisted Figs always ruined the coffee with. I've got organic kale, Figs started. No, Jaeger immediately said as he caught sight of the frying pan filled with a mass of foreign and exotic plants. And blue eggs? Sestive root, Valish leaves. He pointed to some red and purple bits and kept talking like Jaeger hadn't said anything. No. Cage-free Lusa eggs, and some 50-grain the blue eggs, and some sort of tree bark vaguely in the shape of bread. Nah. Toast slathered with soot fruit jam. Jaeger shuddered at the mention of soot fruit after the poisonous drink Figs had given him the night before. Fucking no. Jaeger groaned out, following it with a heavy sigh. Relax, you crotchety old man. Yours is there. Figs grinned and pointed to a small warming box. Jaeger popped it open to see bacon, eggs, and hash browns on a plate. Thank fuck. Jaeger breathed with relief as he retrieved the plate. Excuse me for trying to broaden your horizons. I'm sure Leona would make you eat new food now and then. Figs snorted as he slid his organic slop from the pan onto a plate with the tree bark that was apparently toast. Hey, being a great cook is more than trying crazy new things from bizarre regions. It's also about knowing how to experiment and explore within comfortable genres. Does genre work when describing food? Jaeger asked absently as he slid his plate onto the table and picked up a piece of bacon to bite off a crunchy tip. Yeah, I guess. Figs shrugged and slid his plate down next to Jaeger's so they could eat together. So, your family owns Cheshire Chemicals? Jaeger asked as Figs grabbed them some forks. Yeah. I thought you said you didn't know much about them. Figs gave Jaeger a curious look and handed him a fork. I thought so. Just dunno. Sounded. Jaeger shrugged it off. Maybe you did tell me and I forgot. I think the family barbecue threw me off. He trailed off and tried a bite of the hash browns. They had the perfect golden crispy bite to them. And I remembered something about Grandma Ginger. Ah, OG Ginger. Figs nodded with a smile, obviously cherishing the memory just from Jaeger mentioning her. OG? Jaeger asked. Original Grandma, Figs explained. That's not... I know what OG fucking stands for, Figs hissed out, and then snapped at his piece of toast as bits of grain and oats went flying from the aggressive bite. Jaeger just leaned back a little and had a bite of the fried eggs while waiting for Figs to continue. She was a wonderful tiny woman with a whole lot of hair. If she'd lived longer, my relationship with the rest of my family might have been different. He shrugged it off. So what's the plan today? I need to find the local Golden Web boss, Jaeger said calmly and took a sip of the coffee. As in, the only crime syndicate that posed a serious threat to our operations as Revenant? The crime syndicate that actually fielded troops against the Hive during the war? The same crime syndicate that has access to military-grade weapons, exos, and bots? The same people who've assassinated planetary governors and rules the underworld with an iron fist? Figs asked. The very same. Jaeger nodded just as calmly as before. Can I ask what your plan is for finding them? Figs asked. I'm just going to ask around very loudly until I find them or they find me. Jaeger shrugged it off. Figs stared at him hard for a few seconds and then shrugged as well. Sounds like you know what you're doing then. I can't see what would possibly go wrong with that plan.